Gold digger dumps broke boyfriend, then regrets her decision. This story is very meaningful. Everyone should listen. Bella adjusted the diamond bracelet on her wrist, letting the light from the crystal chandelier above glisten off its pristine surface. She glanced across the candlelit restaurant, her manicured fingers drumming lightly against the white tablecloth. Across from her, John sat with an apologetic smile, dressed in his usual understated style, a crisp button-down and a watch that wasn't expensive, but held sentimental value. He looked at her with warmth, as if she were the only person in the room. Bella used to love that about him, but tonight all she could focus on was the fact that he had taken her to this restaurant instead of the high-end rooftop place she had hinted at last week. She sighed, swirling the wine in her glass. "You know, Cindy's boyfriend just bought her a Chanel bag last week," she said, lifting her gaze to meet John's. "She didn't even have to ask for it." John chuckled softly, running a hand through his slightly tousled hair. "That's great for Cindy. But Bella, do you really think gifts are the most important part of a relationship?" Bella gave a tight-lipped smile, but inside, frustration boiled. "It's not just the gift, John. It's the thought, the effort. It's about showing that you can provide for the person you love." John leaned forward, reaching for her hand. "Bella, you know how much I care about you. I want to give you everything you deserve, but I'm still building something right now. The startup is taking up most of my money, but once it takes off..." Bella pulled her hand back gently, but the message was clear. "And if it doesn't?" John blinked, caught off guard. Bella exhaled sharply. "I mean, let's be realistic. How long am I supposed to wait, John? I see other women being taken care of, going on trips, getting engaged with gorgeous rings, and here I am, splitting bills and waiting for someday." John's face fell, but he quickly masked it with a small, understanding nod. "I get it," he said softly. "You want security. I do too, Bella, but I need to work for it. I'm not going to take shortcuts just to impress you." She pursed her lips, pushing her plate away, her appetite gone. "Maybe I just want something more. Now." John looked at her, searching for something in her expression. Hope, patience. Bluffed her, but he found none. His fingers tightened around the stem of his wine glass, knuckles slightly pale. He wanted to believe that this was just a bad night, that Bella was just in one of her moods, and that tomorrow she would smile at him like she used to, when money and status weren't the foundation of their conversations. But the way she sat across from him now, arms crossed, eyes cold, lips pursed in silent disappointment, made his stomach twist into a knot. "Bella," he said, voice low but steady, "are you even happy with me anymore?" Bella exhaled, rolling her eyes as she picked up her phone and mindlessly scrolled. "John, why do you always have to be so dramatic? I'm just saying that I need more from you. Is that so wrong?" John swallowed, forcing himself to stay calm. "More from me? Bella, I work 70 hours a week trying to build something that we can benefit from in the future. I'm not wasting my time at some dead-end job. I'm building a company. I'm fighting for something bigger than just a paycheck." Bella snorted, setting her phone down with an audible thud. "And while you're fighting for your big dream, what am I supposed to do? Sit around and wait while you figure it out? Live on cheap dinners and someday, baby, I promise speeches? That's not how the world works, John." John felt something crack inside him. He took a slow breath, forcing himself to remain calm, but the frustration was creeping in. "So that's it. Then, you're saying I'm not good enough because I'm not rich right now?" Bella sighed dramatically, shaking her head. "I'm saying that I don't want to struggle. John, I don't want to be the girl who waits around while her boyfriend finds himself and hopes that one day he makes it. I want to live. I want to go on trips, shop without checking price tags, have a boyfriend who can afford to take me somewhere nice without stressing about it." John's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists under the table. He had given her everything he could. Maybe it wasn't enough in her eyes, but he had never let her go without. He worked late nights so he could take her out on weekends. He saved up just to buy her that expensive perfume she had casually mentioned wanting. He never let her see how many times he skipped lunch just to afford little luxuries for her. And yet, none of it mattered. Because it wasn't about him, it was about what he could give her. "I see," John said, his voice suddenly quieter, as if something inside him had just shut down. So, if I don't magically become a millionaire overnight, you're done. Bella glanced around the restaurant as if embarrassed by the conversation. John, stop being so sensitive. He let out a breathless laugh, shaking his head. You know what, Bella? Maybe you're right. Maybe I am being sensitive. Maybe I should have seen this coming a long time ago. She furrowed her brows. What's that supposed to mean? John leaned back, looking at her, really looking at her. The perfectly curled hair, the designer dress he had no idea how she afforded, the diamond bracelet she had begged him for on their anniversary. Even though he had barely scraped enough money together to get it, she looked beautiful. And yet, for the first time since he had met her, she looked ugly to him, because all he could see now was greed. It means, he said slowly, voice steady, that I think we both know where this is going. Bella frowned, shifting uncomfortably. John, don't be like this. Like what? His lips curled into a sad smile. Like a man who just realized that the woman he loves only cares about what's in his wallet? She rolled her eyes again, reaching for her wine. God, you're exhausting. John let out a deep sigh, his shoulders finally relaxing, not in relief, but in resignation. There was no saving this, no convincing her, because at the end of the day, he was exhausting to her, not because of his flaws, not because of his dreams, but because he wasn't rich. He pushed his chair back slowly, standing up. Bella raised an eyebrow. Where are you going? John pulled out his wallet, set enough money on the table to cover dinner, and tucked it away. Then he met her gaze, a mixture of sorrow and finality in his eyes. I'm giving you what you want, Bella, he said. She blinked. What? He exhaled, his voice steady, controlled. Mashudi. Freedom. Bella's lips parted slightly, but before she could say anything, John turned and walked away. He didn't look back, and for the first time in a long time, he finally felt light. Bella sat frozen, watching John's retreating figure as he walked out of the restaurant and into the night. A part of her expected him to turn around, to come back and apologize, to beg her to reconsider, but he didn't. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her wine glass as she tried to process what had just happened. He really left me. She scoffed, shaking her head. Fine. If he wants to walk away, let him. There are plenty of men out there who would actually treat me the way I deserve. Bella pulled out her phone and immediately opened her messages. Olivia. Bella, you seriously need to stop wasting time with that guy. Find someone who can actually afford to treat you like a queen. Bella's fingers hovered over the keyboard. It's over. You were right, the reply came instantly. Olivia, finally. Meet me at Lux Lounge. I have someone I want you to meet. Bella smirked, finishing the rest of her wine in one sip. John made his choice, and so did I. Bella stepped out of the taxi in front of one's Lux Lounge, her heels clicking against the pavement as she adjusted her form-fitting dress. The soft glow of neon lights reflected on the sleek black cars parked outside, and the faint hum of high-end conversations spilled out from behind the velvet ropes. This was the world she had always dreamed of. She took a deep breath, pushing aside the lingering thoughts of John. He was the past. She was moving forward. Inside, the club oozed exclusivity, velvet booths, dim golden lighting, and a crowd dressed in only the finest designer brands. The scent of expensive cologne and aged whiskey filled the air as Bella made her way toward the VIP section, where Olivia Durr was already waiting. Olivia smirked as Bella approached, tossing back a sip of champagne. About time you showed up. You look incredible. Bella flashed a confident smile. I figured I should dress for the occasion. Olivia leaned in. Oh, trust me, it's an occasion. She nodded toward a corner booth where he'd sat. Estefan. The moment Bella's eyes landed on him, she felt an undeniable pull. Tall, confident, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit that fit like a second skin. A Rolex peeked from beneath his sleeve, catching the low lighting with effortless sophistication. He was everything John wasn't. Bella ran a hand through her hair, suddenly aware of the way her heart pounded in her chest. Olivia grinned as if reading her mind. Go on, she whispered. He's been waiting to meet you. Bella smoothed down her dress, exhaling slowly before making her way toward him. Estefan looked up as she approached, a smirk playing at his lips. His eyes traveled over her, not in an overly obvious way, but with the kind of confidence that came from a man who was used to getting whatever he wanted. And tonight, it seemed, he wanted her. He gestured to the seat beside him. Bella, right? His voice was smooth, rich, like a man who never had to rush for anything. Bella slid into the booth, crossing her legs gracefully. You've heard of me already? Estefan chuckled, leaning back with an air of amusement. I make it a point to know who the most interesting woman in the room is. Bella felt a thrill rush through her. This was different. John had looked up at her with admiration. Estefan looked at her like she was a prize to be won, and she liked it. Olivia clinked her glass against Estefan's. Told you she was stunning. Estefan's smirk deepened as he picked up his glass of scotch. You weren't wrong. Bella tilted her head slightly, feigning innocence. And what exactly have you heard about me? Estefan swirled his drink lazily. That you're a woman who knows what she wants, that you appreciate the finer things. He took a slow sip, watching her over the rim of his glass. That you don't like to wait. Bella's breath hitched slightly. He was right. She had spent years waiting for John to become the man she wanted him to be. But why wait, when she could have everything now? Bella leaned in slightly, letting her fingers glide over the stem of her champagne flute. And what do you think I want, Estefan? He chuckled, setting his glass down and meeting her gaze head-on. I think you want a man who doesn't just make promises, he murmured. You want a man who delivers. Bella's pulse quickened. This was what she had been craving. The certainty, the confidence. John had been full of dreams. Estefan, he was already living the dream. And in that moment, Bella decided she wanted in. Bella took a slow sip of her champagne, letting the bubbles dance on her tongue as she held Estefan's gaze. There was something intoxicating about the way he looked at her. Not with desperate admiration like John had, but with certainty, with control. She had always wanted to feel this way. Wanted. Estefan smirked, as if sensing her thoughts. He reached for a cigar on the table, rolling it between his fingers before signaling a waiter to light it for him. The scent of tobacco mixed with the luxury around them, making Bella feel like she had stepped into a different world, a world where she belonged. So tell me, Estefan murmured, exhaling a swirl of smoke, why would a woman like you waste her time on a man who couldn't afford you? Bella tensed slightly at the mention of John, but she masked it with a light laugh, running a hand through her hair. I thought he had potential, she said smoothly. I thought one day he would become someone. Estefan raised an eyebrow. But you got tired of waiting. Bella's lips curled into a smirk. I prefer a man who is someone. Estefan chuckled, clearly satisfied with her answer. Good, because I don't do potential. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping lower. I do results. Bella felt a rush of excitement. This was what she had been missing. John had always talked about someday. Estefan lived in the now. Let me ask you something. Bella. He tapped the ash from his cigar, his dark eyes studying her. What do you bring to the table? Bella hesitated for only a second before flashing her most dazzling smile. I bring me. Estefan tilted his head, amused. Confidence. I like that. He ran his fingers along the rim of his glass, as if considering something. Then he leaned back and motioned toward the lavish VIP section around them. You like this life? Bella's heart pounded. Of course. He took another slow sip of his drink. Then let's make sure you never have to live any other way. Bella's breath caught. Was this it? Was this her ticket to the life she had always wanted? She barely had time to process before Estefan stood, holding out a hand. Come. She took it without hesitation, letting him lead her through the club like she belonged to him already. Olivia shot her a knowing wink from across the room, as if to say, I told you so. Bella felt triumphant. John had always wanted her to be patient, to wait, to believe in a future he wasn't even sure of himself. But this was immediate, and she had never been more sure of anything in her life. Days turned into weeks, and Bella's life transformed in a way Estefan showered her with gifts. Designer dresses, diamond jewelry, and lavish trips to tropical destinations. She spent her afternoons sipping champagne on yachts, her nights in the most exclusive restaurants, and her mornings waking up in high-rise. She posted pictures constantly, luxury shopping sprees, private jets, expensive. Living the dream, girl. Who's the mystery man funding all this? You won. Secure the bag? Sis. Every like, every comment, every envious message made her feel validated. It wasn't long before Bella started noticing things she had ignored at first. Estefan was powerful, yes, but he was also controlling. It started small. One night, she picked out a dress for a gala, an elegant but modest Chanel gown. Estefan barely glanced at it before smirking. Too safe, he said, taking a sip of his whiskey. Wear the red one I bought you. Bella hesitated. I like this one. His smirk faded. And I like the red one. Do you really want to argue about this? She swallowed. It was a small thing. A dress. It wasn't worth a fight. So she wore the red one. Then came the comments. You don't need to be on your phone so much. Why are you following all these guys on Instagram? I don't like you talking to other men. It's disrespectful. At first, Bella found it thrilling. The possessiveness, the way he made her feel like she belonged to him. But soon, the thrill turned into something else. When she went out with Olivia one evening, Estefan called her 10 times. When she finally answered, he was furious. I don't like being ignored, Bella, he said, his voice eerily calm. When I call, you answer. Do you understand me? Bella's stomach twisted. I was just out with Olivia. I don't care, he cut her off. Get home. Now. Her hands shook as she ended the call. Olivia noticed. What's wrong? Bella forced a smile. Nothing. He just worries about me. But deep down, for the first time, she felt something she hadn't before. The final crack came when Bella overheard a conversation she wasn't supposed to. She had just returned to Estefan's penthouse after a spa day when she heard him laughing. But it wasn't the charming laugh she had grown used to. It was cold. You think she's different? Estefan's voice was sharp, amused. Please, women like her are all the same. Bella froze. Another voice spoke. One of his friends. So what's the plan? Keep her around for a while? Estefan scoffed. She's entertaining, but let's be real. She's replaceable. There's always another one looking for an easy life. Bella's blood ran cold. Every expensive dinner, every whispered promise, every moment she had thought she was special. It had all been a lie. She was just another temporary piece in his collection. And in that moment, she realized something terrifying. She had left John because she thought he wasn't enough. But at least John had loved her. Estefan, he had never even respected her. Bella's throat tightened as she backed away from the door, her heart hammering. She needed to leave. Now, but as she turned to grab her things, Estefan's voice rang out again. And this time it was dangerous. You know the problem with girls like Bella, he mused. They think they can just walk away, like I don't own them. Bella felt the air leave her lungs. She wasn't just dating Estefan. She was trapped, and she had never been more afraid in her life. John sat on the rooftop of his small apartment, a half-empty beer bottle resting loosely between his fingers as he stared at the city skyline. The quiet hum of traffic below filled the silence, punctuated by the occasional honk of a distant car. The night was cool, the kind of crisp air that made everything feel a little clearer, a little sharper. But his mind wasn't clear at all. He exhaled slowly, rolling the bottle between his hands before taking a sip. The bitterness of the drink mirrored the ache in his chest, the dull but persistent weight of our absence. Bella. For years, he had built his life around her. Her happiness, her wants, her expectations. He had given her everything he could, even when it meant sacrificing his own comfort, his own needs. He had worked late nights, skipped meals, saved every extra penny to make sure she had the things she wanted. And in the end, it still hadn't been enough. She had walked away without hesitation, without a second thought, because to her, love wasn't enough. Ryan's voice pulled him from his thoughts. So, it's done? John didn't turn. He just nodded, his gaze still fixed on the city lights. Ryan plopped down beside him, stealing John's beer and taking a swig before making a face. Damn, man. Couldn't get something better than this? John let out a quiet chuckle, but it lacked any real humor. Figured I should match my mood. Ryan exhaled, leaning back on his hands. Listen, I know she was your girl and all, but you dodged a bullet. John didn't answer. He just stared ahead, jaw tight. Ryan nudged his shoulder. Come on, man. You really want to spend another night sulking over a girl who chose money over you, May? John clenched his teeth, his grip tightening around the bottle. It's not just about her choosing money, Ryan. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Then what is it? John ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. It's that she never even believed in me. She didn't believe in us. The moment things got tough, she walked. Like I was some bad investment. She decided wasn't worth the wait. He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. I thought she loved me. I thought I was building something for us. Ryan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I get it. Man, it sucks, but let's be real. Did she ever really love you? Or did she just love what she thought you could be? John swallowed hard, the words hitting him harder than he wanted to admit. Ryan continued, his voice softer now. A girl like that, she was never going to be happy with potential. She wanted the finished product. She didn't want to build something with you. She wanted to show up when it was already done. John remained silent, because deep down he knew Ryan was right. Bella hadn't loved him. She had loved the idea of who he could become, and as soon as she realized he wasn't there yet, she had left. John exhaled, nodding slowly. Yeah, I guess you're right. Ryan grinned, punching him lightly on the shoulder. Of course I'm right. That's why I'm the smart one. John chuckled, shaking his head. But there was something different in his eyes now. A shift. A decision. Because maybe Ryan was right. Maybe Bella had done him a favor. Maybe for the first time in a long time, he could stop trying to prove himself to someone who was never going to see his worth. Maybe it was time to build something for Yurak himself. Ryan studied him for a moment before smirking. So, what's next? John took a deep breath, staring out at the city with a newfound sense of clarity. I make sure she regrets it. Ryan grinned. Now, that's the attitude. And just like that, something inside John shifted. He wasn't just going to succeed, he was going to thrive. And this time, he wasn't doing it for Bella. He was doing it for himself. John threw himself into work with a newfound intensity. The heartbreak that had weighed him down just days ago was now fuel for something greater. His ambition, his determination, his need to prove himself. Mornings started earlier. Nights stretched later. He poured every ounce of himself into his startup, making calls, securing meetings, refining pitches. There were setbacks, countless doors slammed in his face, investors who wouldn't even give him 5 minutes, moments where exhaustion gnawed at his resolve. But every time doubt crept in, every time he felt the fatigue pull at him, he remembered Bella's words. I don't want to wait. I need more. Maybe I just want something now. She hadn't believed in him, but that was her mistake. Because John wasn't going to fail. Late one evening, he sat in his tiny apartment, papers and notes scattered across the desk, a cold cup of coffee beside him. His laptop screen glowed with financial projections, prototype designs, marketing strategies. He barely noticed the knock on his door until it came a second time, louder. Yo, open up, Ryan's voice called. John sighed, rubbing his temples before walking over. When he swung the door open, Ryan walked in like he owned the place, a cocky grin on his face. You look like you've been living in here for 3 days straight, Ryan said, wrinkling his nose. Please tell me you've showered at least once. John smirked. No time for showers when you're building an empire. Ryan dropped a takeout bag onto the table. Well, your empire is going to collapse if you die from starvation. Eat. John chuckled, grabbing the bag. He hadn't realized how hungry he was until the smell of burgers filled the room. As he took a bite, Ryan plopped down across from him, stretching his legs. So, what's the latest? Ryan asked, nodding toward the mess of papers on the desk. John wiped his mouth, glancing at his notes. I've got a meeting with Mr. Anderson next week. Ryan's eyes widened. The Mr. Anderson, the investment guy? John nodded. If I can impress him, it could change everything. Ryan let out a low whistle. Damn, that's big, John exhaled. Yeah, but it has to be perfect. Ryan leaned back, smirking. Man, I remember when you used to stress over what to buy Bella for her birthday. Now look at you, trying to land $1 million deal. John chuckled, shaking his head. Feels like a lifetime ago. Ryan studied him for a moment before nodding. Because you're not the same guy anymore. And he wasn't. Bella had left because she thought he wasn't enough, but she had no idea just how much he was about to become. The morning of the meeting with Mr. Anderson, John stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. His reflection stared back at him. Not the struggling, uncertain man Bella had walked away from, but Rakushanamwane stronger. His phone buzzed. "Ryan, you got this. Show them who the hell you are." John smirked, slipping his phone into his pocket. Today wasn't just about getting an investment. It was about proving everyone wrong. As he walked out the door, he knew this was only the beginning. John walked into the towering glass building downtown, his heartbeat steady but firm. He had prepared for this moment relentlessly, refining every word of his pitch, anticipating every possible question. The receptionist guided him to the conference room, where Mr. Anderson and his team were already seated, waiting. The older man studied him as he entered, fingers tapping against the polished wooden table. "John, I've heard a lot about you," he said, motioning for him to sit. "You have 5 minutes. Impress me." John took a breath, pushing down every ounce of nervousness. "I won't waste your time," he said, clicking his laptop to life and beginning his presentation. He spoke with conviction, his voice steady, his ideas sharp. He laid out his company's vision, the market potential, the revenue projections, and most importantly, the problem he was solving. Mr. Anderson listened, silent, unreadable. The weight of the moment pressed against John's chest, but he refused to falter. When he finally finished, there was a long pause. Then Anderson leaned back in his chair. "You remind me of myself when I was younger." John felt his pulse quicken. The older man smirked. "That's why I'm going to give you a shot." John barely registered the rest of the conversation. All he could hear was hearing yes. By the time he stepped out of the building, the weight on his shoulders had lifted. He had done it. He pulled out his phone, dialing the only number he wanted to call. Ryan picked up on the first ring. "Well?" John exhaled, a slow grin spreading across his face. "We got it." Ryan let out a shout on the other end. "Hell yeah, I knew it, man. Drinks on me tonight." John laughed, shaking his head. "Not tonight. I have work to do." Because this was just the beginning. Months passed in a blur. Deals were signed, partnerships were formed. John's startup grew, gaining traction in ways he had only dreamed of before. The long nights, the struggles, the sacrifices, it was finally paying off. And just as life was finally falling into place, something unexpected happened. He met one. It wasn't planned, it wasn't dramatic, it was simple. He was in a cafe, reviewing reports on his laptop, and she was sitting across from him, reading. At some point their eyes met. She smiled first. John hesitated, then smiled back. That was all it took. Conversations flowed effortlessly between them. She wasn't impressed by his wealth, didn't ask what car he drove or what watch he wore. She asked about his work because she was genuinely interested. She listened when he spoke, and for the first time in years, John felt like someone truly saw him. Not for what he could give, but for who he was. One night as they walked through the city, he told her about his past, about Bella, about how, for the longest time, he had felt like he wasn't enough. Rose stopped, turning to him. "John, she never deserved you." He had heard variations of that before, from Ryan, from himself even. But when Rose said it, it felt different. He reached for her hand. "Maybe you're right." She squeezed his fingers lightly. "I know I am." And just like that, John realized he had moved on, not just from Bella, but from the version of himself that needed her validation. Life was good. His company was thriving, his relationship was effortless, and for the first time in years, John felt completely at peace. Then one evening, fate intervened. Bella stood outside a high-end boutique, adjusting the designer sunglasses perched on her head. She had a new bag, new jewelry, a car parked nearby that gleamed under the city lights. She should have felt victorious, but she didn't, because despite everything, there was still a hollow space in her chest, a space money hadn't been able to fill. Then she saw him, John, walking out of a restaurant, looking better than she had ever seen him. He carried himself differently now, confident, assured, successful. But it wasn't the wealth that caught her attention. It was the way he looked at the woman beside him. Rose. Bella's stomach twisted. She had seen that look before, on John's face, when he used to look at her. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she took a hesitant step forward. "John?" He turned, pausing. For a second, she saw something flicker in his expression. Recognition, nostalgia, but not longing. Not the way she had hoped. Rose glanced at Bella, then back at John. "An old friend?" John smiled, polite but distant. "Something like that." Bella's breath hitched. You look good." John nodded. "So do you." An awkward silence stretched between them. She wanted to say more, to explain. But before she could, Rose slipped her hand into John's. The intimacy of the gesture sent a sharp pang through Bella's chest. She forced a smile. "I heard about your company. Congratulations." John gave a small, appreciative nod. "Thanks, I couldn't have done it without the right support." Bella's fingers curled around the strap of her purse. She felt small, because she knew exactly what he meant. She had doubted him. Rose had believed. And now Rose was the one standing beside him. Bella swallowed, trying to keep her voice steady. "I should go. It was nice seeing you." John smiled, warm but indifferent. "Take care, Bella." She turned and walked away, her chest tight, her vision blurring slightly as she blinked. She had won the life she thought she wanted, but she had lost something far greater. And deep down, she knew. Some mistakes could never be undone. Bella stood at the street corner, the sounds of the bustling city fading into the background as she watched John and Rose disappear down the sidewalk, hand in hand. The lump in her throat grew heavier, but she forced herself to lift her chin, adjusting the sunglasses perched on her head. She had spent so much time chasing a life of luxury, convincing herself that money was the only thing that mattered. But now, as she stared at what she had lost, she realized perhaps she had been chasing the wrong thing all along. She could go back to her expensive apartment, her designer clothes, the nights filled with champagne and strangers who barely knew her name. She could keep pretending that it was enough, that she didn't care. But deep down, she knew the truth. She had traded something real for something temporary. Her phone buzzed in her hand. A message from Estefan. "Dinner at 9, don't be late." No heart emoji, no question about how her day was. Just another command. Bella hesitated. For the first time, she questioned if this was really the life she wanted. If she stayed, she would continue living in this cold, materialistic world where love was just a transaction, where she was replaceable. But if she left, what was waiting for her? Could she even start over? She exhaled slowly, the city lights flickering around her, as if they held an answer she couldn't quite grasp. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe this was just the beginning of something else. What do you think? Should Bella get a second chance to change her life? Or is it too late for her? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss part 2. Stay tuned to see what happens next.